Hey, everyone. We're diving into something big today. There's this idea, this theory that's really picking up steam, and it asks a pretty startling question. Is the USA on its way to becoming a Christian state? Now, my job here isn't to convince you one way or the other. We're just going to lay out the evidence, step by step, and let you connect the dots. So let's get into it. So here's the core question, the one that's driving our whole investigation today. Is the USA on a path to becoming a white Christian nationalist state? Whoa, that's a really loaded phrase, right? So what does it even mean? Well, for our purposes, think of it as an idea where being American gets fused with one particular version of Christianity. It's a heavy theory, for sure, and that's exactly how we're going to treat it, as a theory that we need to test against the evidence. All right, so here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we'll look at who might be behind this push. Then, we'll follow the trail into the world of politics. After that, we'll check out what's happening with the public. Is faith actually on the rise? Then things get a little historical. And finally, we'll put all the pieces together so you can make up your own mind. Okay, let's jump right into part one, a nation's identity questioned. To really get a grip on this whole idea, our source material says we need to start by looking at the organizations that are supposedly at the center of it all. And our first stop is the Heritage Foundation. Now, if you follow politics, you've probably heard of them. They're a really influential conservative think tank. According to the evidence we're looking at, they're singled out as a major player in this movement. The claim is that they're using their influence, pushing policy ideas to sort of pave the way for this massive shift in what it means to be American. All right, let's move on to our next piece of the puzzle. This is where things get really interesting, because we're going to look at the supposed ties between this movement and the absolute highest levels of power in the country. And it all seems to revolve around a few key moments in the spring of 2025. So check this out. April 18th, 2025, a message comes straight from the White House. It's an Easter message from President Trump, and in it he tells Americans to, quote, proclaim as Christians. Now, the source material really zeroes in on how blunt that is. It's not just a subtle nod, it's a direct call linking a national duty with a single religion. And apparently that wasn't just a one-off thing. The sources we're examining point to reports from big news outlets, like The Guardian and The New York Times, that came out right around that same time. They were all talking about this new atmosphere in the White House. The gist was that evangelical leaders were suddenly getting way more access, way more influence than before. So you have this message from the top, right? Well, it didn't take long for it to spread like wildfire. Just a few days later, on April 21st, you have well-known figures like Alex Jones shouting from the rooftops, "We're bringing religion back to America." It's a perfect example of how an idea from the White House gets picked up and blasted out to a much wider audience. Okay, so we've seen a political message and how it got amplified. But here's the real question. Did any of it actually stick? Did it change anything for regular people? That's what we're digging into in part 3, a shift in public faith. Let's see what the numbers say. Now, let's jump ahead a few months to October of 2025. The source material points us to this huge event right on the National Mall in D.C. We're talking thousands and thousands of people gathering for a massive communion service. And their stated goal? To turn the mall into holy ground and pray for the soul of the nation. I mean, that's a pretty powerful image. Okay, now at the same time this is all happening, the evidence flags a really specific number. 2.4 million. Just let that sink in. So what is 2.4 million? Well, according to a Wall Street Journal report mentioned in our sources, that's how many Bibles were sold in the United States in one single month, September 2025. And get this, that's a 36% increase from the year before. That's not just a feeling or a trend, that's a hard number, showing something was definitely changing. And it wasn't just book sales. The polling seems to tell the same story. Our sources also highlight a Pew Research study from October 2025. It found that more and more American adults felt that religion's influence in the country was actually growing. So people weren't just buying Bibles, they were feeling the shift. So let's just recap that real quick. It's like a chain of events, right? In April 2025, you get this intense political talk. And then by October, you see these huge public gatherings and the data, the Bible sales, the polls, all pointing in the same direction, a major religious upswing across the country. Okay, we've seen political talk, and we've seen a public response, but the source material saves one of its most dramatic pieces of evidence for last. This one is different. It's deeply symbolic, and it taps into some really, really old history. The sources frame it as echoes from the past. All right, so this is wild. September 26th, 2025. An event happens that would have been unthinkable for centuries. The Knights Templar, yes, those Knights Templar, are officially welcomed back into the fold by the Vatican. I mean, we're talking about a 700-year gap here. These guys were the famous Christian military order during the Crusades. The source presents this not just as a news story, but as a hugely symbolic moment, a key piece in this entire puzzle. And that brings us to our final stop. It's time to step back and look at everything we've covered. We've gone from a think tank in D.C. to the White House to the National Mall and all the way to the Vatican. So let's lay out all the evidence one last time.
So here it is, the evidence in a nutshell. We saw political messages coming straight from the top. We saw more access and power for evangelical leaders. We saw huge religious gatherings in public spaces. We saw a massive, measurable jump in Bible sales. We saw polls that showed people were noticing the change. And to cap it all off, the symbolic return of the Knights Templar after 700 years.
And so we're back to a question. We've laid out the pieces of the puzzle just as they're presented in the source material. What you make of it, well, that's up to you. But it leaves us with one final and pretty profound thing to think about. When a nation's identity and a specific faith start to become one and the same, what happens next? Thanks for joining me on this one.